Alright, so this is a tutorial about getting MelonDS to work with DSiWare through RetroArch and Launchbox. So I've downloaded MelonDS. I will run it for the first time. It's going to generate an INI file here. One of the first things I'm going to do is set up my controller real quick. This is just so I can navigate the windows easier. Okay, so you are going to need some BIOS files here. I cannot link you to the files directly, however they are relatively easy to find. I was just starting with archive.org and looking in there. So these are the BIOS files that came with my pack, specifically for the DS. It also had the original DS, but that's not necessary for in this case. I'm also going to copy over a couple games here. Again, this is up to you to find location or to get your own. This is up to you to get your own copies of these. So go to config and EMU settings. Set the console type to DS experimental here. And then you need to see your BIOS files. However, one thing to note is the BIOS files are named differently here. RetroArch will need them to be will need the most slightly different names. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, going back to the MelonDS here, going to set the location for all of these files. If you wish to, you can also set up an SD card here. I have had mixed results with that. It seems to work fine on the Windows version here of MelonDS. However, in RetroArch, I'm not able to copy any files between them. My original plan was to put all of my games on an SD card and then copy them to the internal memory whenever I wanted to play them. But that is not going to work apparently. At least not currently. So if I boot the firmware here, you can just click anywhere on the screen here to emulate using a stylus. This came with a few apps here that I don't really want installed. Although actually it did come with both of the games that I'm going to install already. I'm just going to remove them anyway. So under System, Manage DSi Titles, and I'm going to delete everything here. So now if I boot the firmware again, everything is gone except for the system programs here. So now to add a game to it, you'd go to Manage DSi Titles, and you're going to import your games. I'm going to just do one of them for now. Download data from NUS. I believe that's Nintendo Update Services. That will download the game's title and icon files. Okay. So now I should have or Climber somewhere in here. Yep. Now the reason I only installed one game is because I want to set up two different NAND files. Because I cannot use the SD card in RetroArch, I'm going to create multiple NAND files and then swap them out within RetroArch uh, as needed. Because like the internal memory is fairly small on the DS, and as far as I know, this cannot be changed. So like I personally I would fill this up in no time. All right, so now I am going to take this NAND file, which is where your game is currently installed. I'm going to throw that into another folder. Now I just copied this here, so there's now two versions. This one is more basically a backup, so I will be swapping this one out whenever I want to install or whatever I want to switch to or a Climber. So I'm going to start MelonDS again and delete this file or the game, and then import Cave Store. All right, so there's Cave Store. Again, if you are using an SD card, you could also just use the system, the data management tool here, assuming you are running the most recent version, 1.4.5. There's another version of the firmware I have that's a bit outdated and does not have this option. So you could copy it to your SD card and then back and forth. Again, this does not work on the RetroArch core currently. So now we have our NAND files for both games. So if I want to switch games, I can delete this file manually. And then copy over the new one. There we go. So back to Aura. Now I'm going to play a little bit of this here, real quick, to show a flaw with this system. Okay, so now I have a save file created. So if I start the game again, it's going to boot to the main menu rather than directly into the tutorial. So I'm going to make just a backup copy of that real quick. So the thing is now, if I delete this NAND file, and then copy this one over again, so you can see it dropped me straight into the tutorial again. So my save file is gone for this now. So I'm going to load this back to open again. Now what you could do to fix this, or to keep your save files, is rather than copy the files to this directory every time, actually move them around. So I'm going to delete this version, and then take my one with the save file and move it over here. So now I have a backup. Now this one now the save file is in here. So I'm going to take case story, move it over here, just to show that this does work. Okay. So now this time, if I move it over, I will have my save file. So the reason I say this is a flaw is because what I plan to do is to use a Launchbox script to move the files over, and I have to move the files rather than copying. I have a feeling that there's a flaw with this, where if for whatever reason the file does not get moved over, like say Launchbox crashes, then like say if I copy it over to the case story file, it would overwrite the Aura version, and that game would no longer be usable. So if you do use a method here of copying the files, or sorry, of moving the files, I would strongly suggest making a backup of all of your NAND files beforehand, just on the off chance that you accidentally delete it. You accidentally delete one. All right, for this next part, we're going to import the firmware and games over to RetroArch. One thing I forgot to mention in the last clip was that you can put multiple games on one NAND file, which is my whole reasoning for wanting to do this. You can put enough on until you can fill up internal system memory, then swap it out for another copy of the memory that has the games on it you want. So I've made two other NAND files here that both have two games on them. I've also copied over a Nintendo DS game. It can be any game really, as long as it works with MelonDS. Doesn't matter. I just picked one at random. So I've also installed RetroArch here. This is the Windows 64-bit version. So I'm going to load a core and install or download the MelonDS core here. Okay, so now if I load this core and go to core information, it says it's missing various firmwares here. These are the DS files I created with MelonDS. So these you will put in the system folder. So you need your 3 firmware. You need the 3 firmware files and 1 of your NAND files, doesn't whichever one you want to start with. I'm copying these, not moving them. I'm also creating a games folder for that random NDS game. Alright, so now if I load the core from MelonDS again, and then go to information, it says that the 4 files I put in are now present. This is why I renamed them, because RetroArch requires them to be in this exact name. So I'm going to load me MelonDS, and then load this random game here. Open up the menu with F1 by default in Windows here, and go to Options. You're going to want to change console mode to DSi, turn off boot games directly. This will force it to boot to the home screen instead. You can also adjust the settings here if you wish. Also, enable DSi SD card. You can enable that if you want, but again, I have not had luck with this in RetroArch. I can get it to recognize the card, however, it will not copy files between them. So after changing those, you go to overrides, and I'm going to just save a core override. However, if you want to use MelonDS for normal DS ROMs too, it's just doing a content directory and then keeping your DS and DSiWare games in a separate directory. I'm not going to use this emulator for regular DS games, so I'm just going to do a core override. So now at this point, I don't think we really need to have this random game here. It's really just for booting it up, so I'm going to make it try. I haven't actually tried this yet. I'm just going to make a blank DS file just to trick it into starting up, basically. Make sure I change the file extensions. Again, that step is not necessary, but probably is not necessary. I'm just trying it out now as I'm recording this. Alright, and now I'm going to load that file I just made. Okay, apparently that does not work. Okay, so I just loaded the actual DS game. I guess that fake file just does not actually work. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure why Defender is blocking it here. I'm just going to cancel it for now. So I can't actually control the game right now, so I'm going to go into the settings and change that. There we go. Touch mode. Uh, you can do mouse or joystick. I'm actually going to do joystick. That's another reason why. That's why I want to use RetroArch in particular over the Windows version. It's because of joystick support. Yep. Now it adds this little cursor here that I can move around and click on stuff with. So this is now started up, and it has the 2 games I installed on one thing here. The 2 games I installed to one NAND file. And just to show it works, I'm going to switch out the NAND file for the alternate games version. And there we go. That's 2 different games. Alright, so now we're going to import the games into Launchbox. Going back to the RetroArch games folder, I'm going to make a couple of copies of these for each NAND each copy of the NAND memory I want to create. Alright, now I have Launchbox. This is a fresh install. Nothing's imported yet. So first off, I'm going to create a platform for the DSiWare. This is not normally a platform that's on Launchbox, so I'm going to scrape it as a DS game. Make sure it has at least one parent, just so you don't lose it in your category list. Now I'm going to set up a RetroArch here. Adding a new version of RetroArch here. Now it did auto-config here, but I'm going to change the location of this to where I had installed this on my desktop. And I'm going to give it a custom name for this first okay, for associated platforms, I'll delete all these. Just Control A to select all of them, and then delete key to delete it. I'm going to add a new platform here, just the DSiWare. For core, I'm going to use MelonDS. It's the only one that's installed, so that's all that's listed there. Parameters, I'm going to do -F for full screen. And I'm not going to make it the default emulator. I forgot something. Under a running script here, I'm missing this in. So when the game starts up, it's going to move this NAND file from the NAND1 directory into the system folder. Set the match mode to 2, so it looks for any program that is named RetroArch launch MelonDS, and then waits for it to close. Then after it closes, it moves the NAND file back into the same directory. Now I'm going to import a new game. I'm going to import all of the NAND files, or the NAND NDS files I made. We're importing it for the DSiWare platform, which would scrape as DS, using the NAND 1 emulator, just for now. And I'm going to disable the local metadata database search here, because that should work, but I've had to re-record this scene a few times because it just is not for whatever reason. I'm not sure why right now. So next up, I need to add another platform for NAND 2 now. This part can get kind of tedious, unfortunately, if you have a lot of NAND files. Oops, I need to set up a new emulator. So I'm setting this up the same way as before, but I'm going to call it NAND2 and use a slightly different script. But so the platform again. Now for the script, I'm going to change it slightly, because I'm going to change the name of this folder here from NAND1, which was the name of the folder in the systems here in RetroArch. This folder. Changing that to NAND2. And on the second line. Once you have your NAND games all imported, you have to change what emulator they're all using. So go to Edit Metadata, go to the Emulation tab, and change the emulator from RetroArch from NAND1 to NAND2, and hit OK. Do this for all of your other NAND entries that you have, like assign it to NAND3, NAND4, and so on. So now I'll start this up. And you can see I have the two games I installed, Acquia and RetroArch Climber. I'm going to tab out to the RetroArch. And my cursor's gone for some reason, but you can see that I have a NAND file here in the system folder that wasn't there before. Go back to RetroArch, I'll close that. And now it's gone from the system folder. It's back in the NAND1 directory. NAND2 should do the same. Yep, I have two different games here, Dodogo and Cave Story. Back to the system folder, NAND's in there. Close RetroArch, and there it goes. And using this method, like I said before, the save files should work with this. Although I feel there is a chance of them being deleted if Big Box crashes and does not run the script correctly. So I strongly suggest you keep a backup of your NAND files. So to show it saves, I'm going to go and do the tutorial again on Aurora Climber. I forgot to set up a controller. Okay, now that the tutorial's done, if I boot up Aurora Climber again, it'll go straight to the menu instead of the tutorial. So I'll switch NAND files to NAND 2. Switch to Dodo and Cave Store. And Dora went to the menu again, so it did save correctly. And I have not tried this with save states at all, so you may have mixed results with that. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and edit your NAND files to whatever you would like. So let's say, okay. So let's see, sure, it's Arkham Asylum, why not? There we go. So now this thinks it's Arkham Asylum. So you can set this to whatever you want. Like set your own custom name, descriptions, pictures. Like personally, I'll be using this as groups of games, probably like 4 games or so per NAND. Now I've started Big Box to show how this works in practice. So I've added it to my library here in the Nintendo category. A section for DSiWare, and there's all the game categories I have, all the game packs. I put 6 in each one, and you just pick whatever one you want and start it. I also have an overlay and shader set up for it. And there you go. Now, also, I forgot to mention in the last section that you can technically add like each individual game to a NAND file. However, that is incredibly inefficient for space. Each of these games can be anywhere from like 5 to 15 megabytes or so. And if the NAND files are all going to be at, I believe, 240 megabytes. So if you can do it this way, so you can have individual listings in your Launchbox, but at the cost of a lot of storage space, especially if you have a large library.